On a foggy afternoon, the heavy sky mirrored my own dark thoughts. Paolo's eyes, once so full of love, now overflowed with a mixture of nostalgia and disdain. Younger women, he muttered, his voice trembling with the conviction he was trying to force, are definitely better. It's embarrassing, to be seen next to an older woman. The words cut like sharp knives, echoing in the gray air like a bitter lament. Oh, if only I could rewrite my story, he sighed. And those words, like an icy dagger, pierced the already worn fabric of our marriage. It was then that I realized our shared memories, the laughter and dreams, had dissolved like mist under the sun. While Paolo drowned in an ocean of regrets, longing for a lost youth, I remained steadfast. I wasn't just a shadow of the past. I was the light that shines with wisdom and experience, a woman who refuses to be defined by the cruel words of a love that had faded. That afternoon, in the face of Paolo's disdain, I chose not to be consumed by the darkness of his words, but to rise as a resilient witness of time. After all, I am not merely a damp page in an old story. I am the narrator writing a new chapter, filled with strength and dignity, where age is only a reminder of battles won and stories yet to be told.
Hey guys, welcome to our channel.
I'm Jennifer, and at 48, I carry with me the story of a love that defied time. At 33, I intertwined my life with Paolo's, a man whose youth was surpassed only by his gentle soul. Our meeting was a twist of fate in the sterile hallways of the hospital where my hands wove healing. I was a nurse with the wisdom of years, and he was a freshly graduated doctor, the sparkle of novelty still in his eyes. The 5-year age gap between us felt like an abyss, which he crossed with a smile, seeking from me not just advice, but a safe harbor. His innocence was not ignorance, but a pure vision of the world that drew me in and enveloped me. Our daily conversations, woven between the ticking of clocks and the whisper of sheets, blossomed into a romance I never imagined. At first, doubt cast a shadow over me, fearful that the age difference could be a veil between our worlds. But Paolo, with his audacious indifference to the numbers marking our years, calmed my restless heart. He taught me that love does not count time in years, but in shared moments, in the synchronized beats of two hearts. For 2 years, our love was a beacon, shining with promises and shared dreams. Under a sky of hope, we exchanged vows, swearing eternity to one another. But after 5 years of what I thought was a rock-solid marriage, cracks began to appear. Paolo, whose smile once warmed me, now spoke icy words that cut deeper than the winter wind. Sarcastic comments slipped from his lips with ease, each revealing a growing regret for not having chosen a younger partner. He did not hide his flirting with young nurses at the hospital, a dangerous game played in plain sight. I, for my part, chose silence. I opted to ignore the flames of betrayal burning before me until the truth emerged. Cruel and relentless, I discovered Paolo's infidelity with a former patient, a woman 10 years younger than I, a secret he kept in the shadows of his broken promises. She was pregnant. Under the weight of a new life growing inside her, Paolo's laughter echoed, a sharp knife of irony and disdain. It was just a slip-up, he tried to justify, but his words cut deeper than he could imagine. Betrayal, a word I never thought would apply to us, a couple united by medicine and love. But there it was, the raw and indigestible truth. With a heavy heart but a clear mind, I decided to move forward with the divorce, seeking the advice of my old friend Alamon, whose wisdom always seemed to light the right path. He recommended an excellent divorce attorney. My choice inevitably provoked Paolo's wrath. Inflated by an overwhelming selfishness, he believed he deserved compensation for tolerating the marriage, as if commitment and dedication could be measured and reimbursed. But I knew the true reward was freedom, the chance to start anew, far from the shadows of disappointment. When Paolo added insult to injury, my patience wore thin, like sand in an hourglass. He stubbornly refused to meet his financial obligations. Reluctantly, I sought refuge in the justice system, a safe harbor where I hoped to repair the damages suffered. During our marriage, the observations and suspicions about his fidelity loomed like shadows stretching at dusk. But I, firm in my resolution, refused to be a silent victim. Armed with my attorney's precise guidance, I fought for what was rightfully mine, alimony that reflected not only my needs, but also the respect I deserved. Separation was inevitable, marking the beginning of a new life. I left behind the apartment we shared, closing a chapter of my story. Paolo's departure for a new hospital was marked by more insults, echoes of judgmental whispers haunting me like ghosts, tormenting my psychological well-being. The decision to leave the hospital where so many memories were woven came after a period of uncertainty, a time when I felt adrift, aimless. But it was in that sea of doubts that I rediscovered my love for the work. With determination, I sought a new professional environment, and fortune smiled upon me. A small maternity clinic, cozy and welcoming, located just 2 blocks from my new home, was looking for nurses. It was the fresh start I longed for. As soon as the interview ended, I felt immediately part of that team. The clinic, though staffed with a small number of doctors and nurses, exuded a warm, almost familial atmosphere. It was the kind of place where excellence in patient care was not just a goal, but a tangible reality. On one of the quietest days at the clinic, an unexpected emergency shattered the calm. A pregnant woman, urgently transferred from another hospital, arrived seeking help. As I registered her name, a chill ran down my spine. It was the same name as Paolo's mistress. Was it just a coincidence? When she confirmed her husband's name, Paolo, a doctor, the doubt dissolved. It was her, the current wife of the man who once vowed to be my partner for life. Faced with this unexpected encounter, I hesitated. Should I reveal our strange connection? I opted for silence. But as days passed, the truth weighed on me like a shadow, becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. Here I was, at the epicenter of my own storm, dressed in the immaculate white of my nurse's coat, when fate decided to weave its cruelest irony. Paolo entered, hand in hand with his wife, for a routine checkup. Our eyes met, and in an instant, the past and present collided in a deafening silence. "Jennifer," he whispered, surprise painting a picture of disbelief on his face. Yes, it's me, the woman he swore to love and protect, now reduced to a mere shadow in his perfect world. I had hoped our paths would never cross again, especially not here, in this sanctuary of healing that had become my refuge. "What are you doing here?" Paolo asked, his accusatory tone slicing through the air like a sharp blade. His wife, until then oblivious to our intertwined story, sensed the tension. "Wait, is it you?" she said, suspicion growing in her eyes. I swallowed hard, struggling to maintain my composure. "I work here," I began to explain, long before, but my words faded, drowned by the cloud of judgment now hovering over us. Paolo looked at me as if I were an intruder in his perfect life, ignoring the fact that he was the one who invaded mine, leaving a trail of broken promises. Suddenly, Paolo exploded, and there I was, in the middle of a hurricane of accusations. His words, sharp as blades, cut through the air, trying to paint me as the villain of a story. "You're always behind us, causing problems," he shouted, with a vehemence that made others around us cast judgmental glances in my direction. I felt myself shrinking under the weight of those stares, an uncomfortable fear settling in my chest. His wife, an actress worthy of an Oscar, placed her hand on her belly, insinuating that I was a threat to her and the baby who hadn't yet seen the world. "Please, you're scaring us," she whispered with a trembling voice, but her eyes avoided mine, and I knew it was all a charade. It was then that the doctor intervened, his calm but firm voice cutting through the tension like a hot knife through butter. "Please leave the examination room," he requested, and I understood. It was not a matter of taking sides, but prioritizing the well-being of the patient. And so, with a heavy heart but a clear conscience, I stepped away, leaving the theater of absurdity where Paolo and his wife were the stars. That encounter shattered me inside. There I was, unjustly judged, trapped in a situation I never wished for. The details of my divorce, which I fought so hard to keep under veils of privacy, were now public knowledge, and every glance cast upon me seemed to carry the weight of an unyielding verdict. Paolo's wife, with her constant presence and biting critiques, became a shadow in my workplace. Even though everyone knew I was innocent, her words were like thorns that pricked me with each step, and there she was, pregnant and vulnerable, making me feel torn between compassion and the need to protect myself. Silence became my refuge, my response to the tension stretching to the horizon of a childbirth that would still take over 6 months. That hospital, once a sanctuary of healing, now felt like a prison of glances and whispers. The pressure was unbearable, and although I loved my work, the idea of resigning began to form as a necessary escape. When I submitted my resignation letter, the director simply looked at me, and in that silence I understood everything. Even though I hadn't done anything wrong, doubt began to gnaw at me. Why did I, who had dedicated my life to caring for others, deserve to be seen as the source of their pain? Tired, I left behind not just a job, but also a part of my own essence. I left the hospital with the memories of a broken marriage and a shattered heart. With each step toward my parents' house, I felt the weight of Paolo's judgment, but also the lightness of freedom. My parents, with their warm smiles and tight hugs, welcomed me back to the nest without a single word of reproach. They knew words were unnecessary. Comfort lay in their silent presence. In the first days, I wandered through the house like a ghost, haunted by the guilt of not being on the front lines, saving lives. But guilt is a visitor that doesn't stay forever. Over time, it bid farewell, making space for a new determination. I decided it was time to start anew, even if it meant trading syringes for cash registers. Thus, I found myself donning an apron instead of a coat, working in a local supermarket. It was a different world, where the rhythm was dictated by the sound of scanning groceries, not by the incessant beeping of heart monitors. The responsibility still weighed, but in a different, lighter way. After all, here, a mistake meant an apology, not a life at stake. And it was in this unexpected environment that I began to heal, not just others, but myself. With every smile exchanged with customers, every casual chat in the canned goods aisle, I felt reborn. I was learning to live again, far from the shadows of the past. And each day was a step toward a future where I could be more than just a nurse or a betrayed wife. I could be myself, whole and entirely. When I look back, I realize I should have returned to the home I always knew much earlier. 3 years have passed since I came back, and it was under the welcoming roof of my parents that an unexpected opportunity blossomed. The supermarket where I worked part-time recognized my dedication and offered me a full-time position. The joy of being valued for my hard work was genuine, and I accepted the offer with a smile I hadn't felt in years. As time passed, people began to see me not just as a diligent employee, but as someone deserving of a second chance at love. Marriage proposals came, and though I was 45 years old and had no intention of marrying again, I politely declined them. But one offer surprised me. The supermarket manager, a man I respected, suggested I meet someone who, like me, had suffered the pain of divorce. My initial refusal was challenged by the persistence of the offer, which echoed in my mind for days. Finally, curiosity got the best of me, and I agreed to meet this person. We decided no intermediaries were necessary. Our maturity would allow us to handle it directly. And so, with a mix of hesitation and hope, I arranged a meeting that might open the door to a new chapter in my life. The restaurant chosen for the meeting was a refuge of soft lights and murmurs of conversation. Edward was already there, and upon seeing me, he stood up so abruptly that his chair fell with a clatter, turning his cheeks as red as the roses on the table. I couldn't help but laugh. It felt like we were in a romantic comedy. "I'm Edward. Thanks for coming," he said, composing himself with a charm that erased any awkwardness. "Nice to meet you." "I'm Jennifer," I replied, and something about that disastrous first meeting made us relax immediately. As the conversation flowed, I learned that Edward had noticed me while shopping at the supermarket during a business trip. He was so enchanted that he convinced the manager, who, coincidentally, was an old college friend, to introduce us. "I'm looking for something serious, if possible," he confessed with a sincerity that caught me off guard. I had gone to the meeting prepared to reject any advances. But there, in front of a man who seemed so genuine, I found myself wanting to see him again. Maybe it was the way he smiled with his eyes, or perhaps it was the shared courage of taking a new step after the scars of the past. Whatever it was, I knew this was a story I wanted to live. 6 months into a romance that felt like something out of a fairy tale, there we were, Edward and I, standing before the altar. My parents looked at him with growing affection, seeing in his personality a reflection of happiness that enveloped us. Our life became a mosaic of care and tender gestures, a harmonious dance of two mature souls no longer seeking parenthood, but simply each other's company. But then, at 48, life decided to surprise us. It wasn't illness, it was a miracle growing inside me. Pregnant! At 48, the idea seemed as distant as the stars. The suspicion of illness turned into the certainty of new life, and I knew that Edward also felt the weight of the revelation. "I'm pregnant," I said, my voice a mixture of fear and awe. "That's wonderful," Edward said. He stood frozen, his eyes scanning the distance between reality and dream, until finally, with an expression of pure disbelief, he wrapped me in his arms. "So we're going to be parents?" he asked, his voice choked with emotion. "Yes, it seems so," I confirmed, feeling his heartbeat strongly against mine. "Incredible, a miracle," he whispered, and I knew that, regardless of the challenges, that embrace meant we would face everything together. The uncertainty of parenthood at this stage in life haunted me, but the thought of ending such a precious existence was unbearable. Each beat of my heart seemed to resonate with the new life inside me, a constant reminder of a decision weighing on my shoulders. The questions echoed in my mind. What are you going to do? I was well aware of the risks of advanced maternal age, both for the mother and the child. Society has its opinions, and not everyone would look kindly on our decision. People might question, judge, coldly calculate. How old will you be when your child turns 20? I leaned forward, the murmur escaping my lips like a confession. Is it okay if I go through with this? The question hung in the air, heavy with a weight I never imagined carrying. The possibility of not having the baby had never crossed my mind, but now, with age weighing on me, it was an undeniable factor. "Of course, love," he replied, and something in his tone made me believe he truly understood. Edward's feelings seemed so genuine that, for a moment, I allowed myself to be enveloped by them. But over time, a shadow of concern began to form on his forehead whenever he looked at me. Even a man like Edward, who had faced so many challenges, couldn't help but imagine the complications that could arise with the pregnancy. We discussed it at length, our conversation stretching late into the night, but our desire to have this baby never wavered. With the guidance of doctors, we began to prepare, and though our parents were initially surprised and concerned, they couldn't hide the excitement they felt. It was decided that I would give birth at a renowned hospital, equipped with everything necessary to ensure the safety of both mother and child. My obstetrician was a caring and highly competent man, whose words always brought comfort. On the day of one of my prenatal checkups,
There
not
are
only was he
invisible scars that shape lives. Abuse steals your peace, but not your strength. Breaking the Cycle of Abuse is an interactive guide where you'll find powerful tools to identify the signs of abuse, understand the dynamics of violence, find shelter and legal and psychological support, plan a safe exit from a harmful environment, overcome trauma and rebuild your self-esteem. Start your journey of healing and transformation now for just $9.60.
checkups. Not only was he present, but also an internal medicine doctor, an extra precaution we hadn't expected. Edward was supposed to be there with me, but an urgent commitment held him back, and I had to face the exam room alone. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the nerves that assailed me, but as I entered, a familiar figure surprised me. There he was, Paul, my ex-husband, with a look I hadn't seen in years. What was he doing here? Here I stand, in the middle of the hospital corridor, the echo of my steps mingling with the distant hum of conversations and the incessant beeping of heart monitors. The air carries a sterile scent, but today it's infused with something else. The irony of fate. Paul, my ex-husband, the man who once promised to stand by me in sickness and in health, now stands before me with a sneering smile that doesn't match the white coat he's wearing. Really, Jennifer? Pregnant at 48? It's impossible to give birth at your age, he says, his laughter bouncing off the white walls like a cruel melody. The obstetrician and the nurse beside him exchange confused looks but don't interrupt. You have no right to say such things, I respond, my voice firm despite the internal trembling. I'm just concerned, he retorts, but his words ring hollow. A grandma getting pregnant is disgusting, he continues, and I feel the weight of each word like stones pressing against my chest. Is this how you treat patients? With no regard for the anxiety that pregnant women already face. My indignation grows, fueled by the injustice of his words and the memory of everything I had already overcome. I was stunned by Paul's cruel words, which stirred a mix of anger and disbelief in me. How could a doctor, whose role is to treat and comfort patients, behave so arrogantly and insensitively? My mind spun with outrage as he continued his malicious remarks. It's unbelievable that someone in your position would act this way. Do you really call yourself a doctor? This hospital mostly serves celebrities, you know? You'd be better off leaving before you embarrass yourself, Paul said, pointing to the door. My husband Edward entered the room, sensing the tension in the air. His expression shifted from surprise to concern upon seeing my flushed face and Paul's pale demeanor. What's going on here? Edward asked, his deep voice echoing through the room. I was just told by this Dr. Paul that it's disgusting to give birth at 48, I explained, feeling my heart race with frustration. Edward looked at Paul with icy eyes. Dr. Paul, are you responsible for these deplorable words? Paul began to stammer, but Edward didn't allow any excuses. How dare you insult a patient like this? What kind of hospital is this? The nurse returned with the director, who seemed surprised by the scene unfolding before him. Sir, he began, but Edward interrupted him. I thought this place was trustworthy, but I was wrong. The director then revealed something shocking. This man is no longer our doctor, he said. I just fired him. He will never step foot here again. I took a deep breath, feeling some comfort in the hospital's quick action in handling the situation. However, Paul's malicious words continued to echo in my mind, reminding me of the importance of finding healthcare professionals who treat their patients with respect and dignity at all times. Paul protested, but his words were drowned out by the director's authority. Silence, he ordered. Leave now and never return. As Paul was escorted out by the obstetrician, the director apologized to us. We composed ourselves, sat down, but Edward's indignation still burned, an inextinguishable flame that promised justice. The director shook his head with a heavy sigh. It was hard to believe that someone like Paul had ever been allowed into this hospital. Paul was here for only a week, he explained, sounding genuinely regretful. His father was a classmate of mine, and he asked me to give his son a chance. I had no idea he was like this. Not all the doctors in this hospital are like him, I assure you. I was intrigued by this revelation, trying to process how someone with such inappropriate behavior could have been hired in the first place. The obstetrician present tried to calm the situation, assuring us that the hospital was in the hands of competent professionals. Asterisk, asterisk, if it weren't for him. I would have liked to give birth here, asterisk, asterisk, I declared, feeling relieved to see Edward nod in agreement. His father, a powerful president of a large company with branches nationwide, had recommended this hospital to me. His mother, once seriously ill, had been cared for here, and in gratitude, the family generously donated to health and social assistance. This personal connection made everything even more significant for us. It was comforting to know that, despite this unpleasant incident, there was a real commitment to care and respect for patients, which was fundamental to our trust in hospital. As the director continued to apologize and assured us that measures would be taken to prevent something like this from happening again, I felt a slight relief. The situation was being resolved, and now we could refocus on what truly mattered: the safe and happy arrival of our child. A few weeks had passed since the incident with Paul, but the shadow of his arrogance still lingered over me. That was when he had the audacity to reach out, begging me to intercede on his behalf with the director to reconsider his dismissal. He insisted that he had learned a lesson and was willing to change. But I couldn't believe his words. I discovered that Paul had a history of offending patients with his arrogant attitude, bouncing from one hospital to another. It was hard to imagine that someone could repeatedly make the same mistakes. His father, it seemed, always rescued him from these situations, perhaps without realizing that this behavior only allowed his disrespectful conduct to persist. Edward was by my side when Paul called. Without hesitation, he took the phone from my hands and confronted Paul firmly. He threatened to report him to the police for harassment if he dared to approach me or call again. It seemed Edward's words had an effect, as Paul never tried to contact me again. Some time later, while returning from the hospital, I stopped at a convenience store and saw Paul working there. It was evident that no hospital had hired him since. He looked visibly defeated, his eyes red from crying, telling me that his wife and child had left him. However, I felt no sympathy for him. I chose to avoid that convenience store from then on, wanting to keep my distance from someone whose past behavior still bothered me deeply. I gave birth to a healthy girl. She was absolutely adorable, wrapped in an aura of innocence that melted my heart from the moment I first saw her. I promised myself I would raise her with all the love and responsibility I could offer, regardless of the circumstances. Edward, in turn, fell in love with her instantly. From the moment she came into the world, he proved to be an extraordinarily loving and attentive father. His dedication was palpable in every smile he shared with our daughter, in every playful moment that brought them together, in every peaceful moment he provided for our little family. Watching the bond between father and daughter grow stronger day by day was a blessing I couldn't help but cherish. Every moment was precious, every laugh a melody that filled our home with joy. However, I also learned to be cautious, to protect this treasure with all my strength, knowing
Want
that the
more
world can be
mysteries,
harsh
twists,
and
and
unpredictable.
exciting moments? So you can't miss this video. Click now and continue this journey of fascinating stories. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and activate the bell so you don't miss any news. Leave your comments and see you next time.